Okay, I think we can get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us to this webinar today, organized by Mental Health Europe. My name is Jennifer Aurelides, and I'm Communications Officer at MHE. We will kick off today's event with the screening of award-winning short film Withdrawals, which will be followed by a panel discussion about over-medicalisation in mental health care. And to everyone who's joining us tonight or today, depending on where you are based, you're truly in for a treat because we have an excellent lineup of speakers for you. And I very much look forward to today's discussions. We are joined today by Jorja Hudson, who is the director and writer of the short film, as well as Kelly Steer, who produced the film. Then we are joined today by Chloé Lebos, who is the vice president of the European Pharmaceutical Students Association, and Antonella Bugeja, who is a youth mental health advocate from Malta. For those of you who might not be familiar with MHE, Mental Health Europe is Europe's largest independent non-governmental network organization advocating for mental health. And we represent the rights, the human rights of people with psychosocial disabilities or mental health problems, users of mental health care services, and their families and carers. And I think what's noteworthy to mention again here, given the topic of the webinar, is that we are independent from any influence from the pharmaceutical industry. Now, before we start screening the film, just a few housekeeping rules or a remark for our viewers. There will be the opportunity for you to ask questions to the panel towards the end of the discussion. So if you have any questions throughout the film or throughout the discussions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box of this Zoom webinar, and we will make sure to take time later on to answer them. So now, without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Jorja to introduce the film Withdrawals.
Hi, thank you so much, Jennifer and Mental Health Europe for having us. I'm Jorja. I'm based in Los Angeles, but we made this film in New York City in 2019. I was doing comedy, writing, performing, and a lot of my friends and I all had mental health struggles. And in 2016, my GP, she put me on an antidepressant for anxiety called Lexapro. And my body didn't really respond to it very well. I felt very blank and like a zombie, so I stopped taking it. But then I, was talking to several of my friends about it, and I found out that they had all been taking it, and that they had also stopped taking it. So I thought it was interesting that we all had this experience, but no one was talking about it. So I thought it would be a very interesting idea for a film. And yeah, come 2019, I met Kelly, and we finally managed to produce it and finished it just before 2020. And I'm very excited to hear what everyone thinks about it. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much for these introductory words, Jorja. We will start now with the screening of the film. And for that, simply click on the link that we just shared in the chat box of this Zoom webinar, and it will take you to the film. The film is about 12 minutes, but to make sure that everyone has enough time to watch it or perhaps grab a cup of coffee or a tea quickly, we will meet back here in 15 minutes. If you have any issues whatsoever accessing the movie with the link, just send us a message in the chat and we will be happy to help you. So everyone, enjoy watching Withdrawals and see you back here in 15 minutes. Okay, I think everyone is slowly coming back and had enough time to check out the film. So welcome back, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the film as much as we did. And before we jump into the discussion, I would like to give each speaker the opportunity to briefly introduce themselves, the organization, or what they do. And I would like to start with you, Chloe, because I think as Vice President of the European Pharmaceutical Students Association, you bring quite a unique and important perspective to today's conversations. And I'm very pleased to have you on the panel. So Chloe, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Jennifer. My name is Chloe. I'm a fourth-year pharmacy student in France. And as you said, I'm the Vice President of European Affairs for the European Pharmaceutical Student Association. We also work a lot on mental health because it's also an issue amongst a lot of healthcare students. And I think that's something that we'll be able to discuss as well in the rest of the discussion. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Antonella, would you like to go next and tell our audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi, I'm Antonella, and I'm a 20-year-old medical student. I'm also the youth activist representative in Malta of a campaign called Stand for Something, which is basically the role of it is to gather young people's opinions on what they would like to see change in the European Union. And I'm also in a number of different organizations where I focus a lot on sexual health and mental health.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Antonella. Lastly, before I start my first question to Jorja, I would like to give also Kelly the opportunity to briefly introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I was the producer on Withdrawals with Jorja. I work in several different areas of the TV and film industry out here in the US, and try to do my best to involve anything and everything I'm working on creatively with mental health and comedy.
Perfect. Thank you very much, all of you. And Jorja, first of all, I want to congratulate you and Kelly for this brilliant film. I really enjoyed watching it. It made me laugh, it touched me, and I think also very cleverly pointed out some of the main issues that we are facing nowadays when it comes to mental health care. So I was wondering if you could start off by telling us a bit. I mean, you already in your introduction kind of outlined, but what was the process, how this film came about, and yeah, why you chose the specific topic for the film.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words about the film. It's strange watching it now, like a couple years after we made it. But yeah, I was doing comedy, performing and writing in the New York comedy scene for, my 20s. And I had a lot of friends who struggled with mental health, and I've struggled with anxiety my whole life. So I was put on an antidepressant in 2016 for the first time. I didn't like how it made me feel, so I stopped taking it. And you're not supposed to just stop taking it cold turkey. You're supposed to talk to a doctor. I did not, but I then found out through talking to 3 of my closest female friends that they did the same thing, and that we had all had very different experiences. They're not exactly the ones shown in the film, but they're inspired by just how different, even 4 women of the same age living in the same place, our bodies and brains reacting so differently. So it just inspired me to want to open up a discussion about medication, have more people be open about it, share their experiences, because there isn't that many anecdotes out there, and there's not even that much information, I think, from the doctors who give this to us in the first place. So I just found it a really interesting topic to explore using comedy.
Yes, and that's a perfect transition to my next question, because I was going to ask about exactly that, using comedy, because I think what many people might not realize, me including, you know, when you think about comedy, what you associate with this is perhaps like a stand-up comedian trying to make people laugh, telling jokes, you know, but perhaps not necessarily that it's actually such a powerful tool or such a powerful genre to especially talk about, you know, topics that are maybe a bit difficult to talk about, or emotions are maybe a bit difficult to talk about. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that, why comedy is your preferred choice of genre or tool for this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically exactly what you said. I think that comedy is the most accessible way to talk about difficult topics. And I think there's definitely a lot more mental health discussions in like dramas and films like that, but not so many yet getting there in comedy and dark comedy. And, you know, everyone in society is just so tired from like the news and everything that's going on that at the end of the day, we don't necessarily want to watch something that's like serious discussion on mental health. So, or you know, any other serious societal issue. So that's where I find that comedy helps too. It's like a bridge between what we should be thinking about discussing and the ability to actually be able to watch these things and enjoy them, hopefully.
Yeah, great. Thank you. My next question, Kelly, is for you. I was wondering, I mean, you kind of outlined it again as well in the beginning, that you are specifically focused on mental health in the film industry. But I was wondering if you could talk a bit about what about the project struck you or made you want to produce it?
Hi. So I think Jorja and I have been introduced through mutual friends, and at that time I was living in New York City working on different things and working in the comedy scene. I think I just noticed it was the irony behind like all of my friends being depressed and like making comedy, and this idea that we weren't talking about it, but we were so comfortable talking about so many other things in comedy. So it was just kind of the stars aligned when Jorja kind of needed help on this film, and I immediately wanted to do something about it because I remember the isolation and like the loneliness from feeling like a funny person that's sad. So that's definitely what drew me to it.
Okay, and I was wondering, how has it been, because as you both said, it's still a bit of a new topic that is now perhaps getting more common to be a topic in movies or in films. And I was wondering, how has it been perceived by the US or by the global audience? And do you think there are still barriers, or did you run into any barriers in, you know, making this film, or maybe convincing people that it was going to be successful, that it's relevant for audiences?
Yeah, so we haven't really, this is sort of our first foray in the international audience, so thank you all for watching. So we're not really too sure. We'll find out today, sort of. But as far as US audiences are concerned, you know, we released it through several different film festivals throughout the US during the year, you know, like 2020 and a little bit of 2021. So I think it was received pretty well for the time that it was given a release, because, you know, I had a friend that I had gone to like high school with that had reached out to me and was like, my girlfriend of 8 years is just getting off of antidepressants, and she, you know, I showed her this, and she kind of used this to help explain to me kind of the different things that I might be going through, although she may not completely understand within her own mental, you know, wellness or mental health. So, you know, I think it's been received pretty well. I think that we saw more of a surge of people kind of feeling more open to talk about it, especially, you know, in the US, it's been kind of a chaotic year. And the world has been a chaotic few years. Well, actually, yeah. So, you know, I think people responded really well to it in that sense. But I think there was a second part to that question that I can't remember.
Oh, it was just about, you know, if there were any barriers that you faced about making a movie or making a film specifically about mental health when it comes to convincing, you know, I don't know, publishers or whoever's involved in this, that it will be of interest to the audience, or that it will be successful, you know, these kind of things, because it's quite a new, or maybe not so common globally yet, topic for arts or films.
Yeah, I think we faced a lot of barriers because, we were trying to find investors for the film. And I think the investors that we did end up finding for the film, it was something that related to them personally. I think in any time when you're looking at advocacy for any type, it's usually something that's affected the person personally. So that was a different sort of reasoning for the investors that we wanted. But it was also important to us when we were reaching out to folks that they had a passion for this as well, because overall, when we were producing and creating this film, we really wanted to do it right and do it justice, because it is a tough topic with a lot of sort of variables. But yeah, like I said, I think at first people didn't really kind of understand it, but then I wonder a lot during the pandemic, I think it brought up a lot of stuff for people. And that seems to kind of stimulate the conversation that I think people, felt a little more comfortable to discuss what they were going through.
Yes, and I think it speaks to the success of the film that it is so authentic and so relatable, because it was, co-written by persons with lived experiences of mental health problems, or so that it's very truthful in that sense, and I think, like I said, it speaks to the success of the film. And another thing that I thought of is that I think it also goes back to a bit what you outlined, Kelly, about kind of representation, right? Or seeing these stories that people are experiencing, mental health issues in their daily lives kind of represented on the big screen, which might help them to start conversations about mental health with their friends or their families. Now, before we move on to the next part of our discussion, I would just like to open the floor to the rest of our panelists. If Antonella, Chloe, if you would like to share your impression of the film, what did you think of it, or was there, was there a scene in particular that resonated with you? Or if not, then I'm happy to move. Yes, Chloe.
Yes, well, thank you. Well, I have to say the film is very well put and is very clear. I think it's a good message as well to promote to patients, because as it mentions, and as you both mentioned, there is, I think, a lack of knowledge around the dangers of taking antidepressants. And it's even for us as pharmaceutical students, we try to do a lot of campaigns on the side effects, but I think it's also very much it's sometimes better understood when it comes from patients themselves, because usually when you go to a doctor, you're trying to find a solution, so you don't really want to hear about it. But I think that type of prevention and showing it is really useful. And thank you very much for making the movie.
I agree with Chloe. I think it's an amazing way of, talking about something which is really important. And, as you guys were saying as well, at this point, people are kind of tired of all the bad news and the kind of very formal discussions on things, and having such a movie is a really good way of even just starting conversations with your friends, or if you want to explain to someone how you are feeling, you can definitely use this movie to just kind of show them in a way that maybe you can't explain. And for me, something that really stood out was when one of the girls said, like, he didn't even ask why I was depressed, because I feel like on that one sentence, we can talk for hours and hours, and it brings about so many problems of the mental health care system. And even, me as a medical student, I kind of, we see how even the way we're taught, we're not really taught on how to help patients or how to properly therapeutically treat. It's more of a medical, system, and that's definitely not the most effective way. And yeah, I'm sure we're going to be talking about this in more detail later, so I'll leave it at that. But, I really love that statement, and I'm really glad that you put it there, because it's very important.
Yes, for sure. And that's actually one of you hit the nail on the head with that, Antonella, because that's something that we will be discussing later on. Now, for the next part of the panel discussion, we will talk about some of our speakers' mental health journeys with taking medication. And I'm very grateful that they have offered to share this, as it normalizes, or it helps to normalize these very important conversations that we are having about mental ill health, and because it can empower, anyone watching today who might be in a similar situation, who might experience the same. Now, before that, though, I would like to just briefly explain everyone what we mean, what we actually mean when we talk about psychiatric drugs, as it can be quite a specific topic, especially if you're perhaps not familiar with the mental health care system. So I just want to make sure we are all on the same page and have a shared understanding of what we are talking about. So psychiatric drugs can be understood as substances that can affect your mind, your emotions, and your behavior. And they can change the way we think, for example, the way we feel, and generally see the world. And some of their effects are experienced as beneficial, and they surely do help some people to manage their mental health problems on a daily basis. But there can be extreme side effects, especially if you're coming off medication, especially if you're quitting cold turkey, as the characters in the film. There can be quite extreme, unpleasant effects that can last for a long time and sometimes even forever. So to sum up, generally speaking, psychiatric drugs can be understood as kind of tools that may or may not be helpful to people in their recovery journey at certain points in their lives. And beginning any course of psychiatric drugs, I think it has become clear, is not a decision to be taken lightly, or to, that it should be a quick fix just handed out by the doctor, but that it's a decision that that both the doctor and the client need to be fully informed. And I would like to start the discussion here, or kind of pick up where Antonella left us, Jorja, because I think this is really a good entry point to start the conversation. That scene in the film, right, where one of the characters points out that her doctor never even asked her why she was depressed. So to offer her perhaps a variety of different mental health care options, such as talk therapy or peer support, and trying to understand and resolve kind of the root of the problem, rather than just, like fixing the symptoms in a way. And I'm wondering if this is, since it's a semi-autobiographical film, if it's something that you experienced yourself or that you observed in your circle of friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it speaks to the over prescription or even underdiagnosis of people, when doctors will just prescribe something that is common, that is popular, that has worked for different people, because everyone's bodies, as we know, or as we are learning, like react so differently. So yeah, for that line, I didn't realize it would resonate so strongly, but I'm glad it did. And it's also similar to a different line where Jenny's character says, "My doctor is an app," and this was before COVID and telemedicine, kind of. So it just, I don't know, I just felt like it's very impersonal, especially like with like the US healthcare and our issues with insurance and everything like that. There's definitely a tendency to overprescribe and do a quick fix, because therapy can take a long time, and first, like for a lot of people, it's inaccessible or too expensive, and it's much easier to put like the band-aid on the problem, which may work for a few weeks, a few months, a few years, but maybe not forever. So yeah, this should be a much deeper thing to explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I found the final scene very moving as well, where the four friends kind of grapple with the side effects, the diverse side effects they all experienced, but also shared kind of learnings, from the experience of quitting their medication together. And I was wondering if these were lessons that you learned yourself, or that your friends shared with you, or if you have any other kind of realization or learnings, from your own mental health journey of taking medication.
Yeah, I think my message with the film was to not have a message either way of saying like medication is bad or medication is good, or going off of it is bad or good. It's very just like shows the different stories, and people can make of it what they will. So yeah, that final scene, it wasn't so much based on anything that we had said, because we are all still on our various mental health journeys, and some of us are on different medications, some of us are not. So it's an ongoing thing. So I think it was just nice to show the girls together, because the film was so separate, and how we showed them all very isolated in their journeys. And and we had some lines about therapy that we actually cut out of the film because they sounded like, I don't know, a bit too like sugary sweet, like if that makes sense. So we took those out and kind of left more implications like to the viewers and to the audience to make their own decisions about what it means.
Yeah, exactly. It has a bit of an open end, or it really emphasizes that we are all such diverse individuals, and what might work for one person might not work for the other person, and you cannot really judge or compare in that sense. And you just need to figure out what works best for you. And, you shouldn't kind of stigmatize or self-stigmatize one mental health journey towards the other, because you just need to find out what works for you. So thank you very much, Jorja, for sharing this. And we are very lucky to have another very outspoken and dedicated mental health advocate with us today, who will share a bit about her experiences. So Antonella, during our Instagram Live conversation that we had for the World Mental Health Day, I remember you explained to us that you were subscribed medication in high school, but back then decided not to take it, among other things, because of your exams at the time. And now you recently did start to take medication to complement your therapy. And I was wondering if you could walk us a bit through the process, because I'm sure you had a lot of back and forth and considerations. So what were doubts that you had when it comes to taking medications, but also what were perhaps reasons that you now chose to give it a go for now?
Okay, so I've been struggling with mental health since I was 13. And I'm still getting new diagnoses, and I'm still figuring out a lot of it. But basically, yeah, there was quite a journey with medication as well. Back then, I was 15, and as a minor, my parents were very, highly involved in my mental health care. And them being 60 years old, and in our country, there's a lot of stigma related to it. They didn't really care much about it. So, not being properly told what I was given, and kind of dealing with a lot of stigma that I internalized as well, was one of the main reasons why at the time I didn't take the drugs. I mean, I did take some psychiatric meds, but like the GP originally prescribed antidepressants. And at the time, all I knew of antidepressants was, oh my God, it will make you fat, or it will change your personality, and these kind of very exaggerated rumors about it. And at the time, I had been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and anorexia, but I didn't really understand why I needed to take the meds. No one really explained. The doctor just said, you should take antidepressants. And then my parents said it was up to me. And I decided, exams start in 4 days. I know how I am now. I don't know how I will be with them. So at the time, then he gave me kind of less intense meds and some vitamins, and I took that. I don't really regret the decision. However, I do see that a lot of that decision was kind of due to the stigma and the fact that, I didn't really have any proper guidance on the meds. And being 15, you don't really know what they're going to consist of. In the meantime, I continued working on my mental health. At the time, I didn't really have therapy, again, because I was a minor. That is something that I really dislike, kind of the fact that children's mental health is so dependent on their parents, when a lot of the times with kids, it's the parents that are causing the issues. So there should be kind of a better system where mental health care professionals have more of a say as well to kind of help. Eventually, I continued working on myself through therapy. When I moved out and, was over 18, I started going to a therapist and working on things. And for quite a while, I improved a lot. I used to, reflect, like I used to write in my diary, like 3 hours a day. I used to really, work on getting better, and I did get better. But mental health isn't something that you just work on a bit and it gets better and then it's never bad again. It does get bad, and it took me a while to realize that I did get bad again. And so now, I believe that there were like 3 main things that allowed me to take meds now. One of them was kind of accepting the internalized stigmas that I had, accepting that I did have those stigmas and that they are there, but they're not necessarily true. Another thing is this time, I have a good therapist that guided me. I have a good psychiatrist that also guided me. I asked what I needed to know. He told me, the information that I needed. And it was a more informed decision that I was like, okay, I'm currently on antidepressants and antipsychotics. And I was like, okay, yes, I do need them. With my therapist, we decided, okay, I need something to kind of stabilize my mood, to help me get better at a baseline in order to actually get something good out of therapy. Like that personally really motivated me, understanding that if I don't get meds, the therapy is not going to be that useful at this point. So that really helped. And realizing like at this stage, I was, not eating at all, almost not sleeping. I had a very bad, like basic way of living. And I hadn't realized until now when I look back at it and I was like, okay, so there were those 2 main things. And, having a good support system with my friends really, really helped as well. And I also just kind of changed my mentality and realized that, there is a stigma that it's seen as being weak to get meds. It's seen that, you're lazy, you gave up and you stopped trying to work on yourself and now you're on meds. But in reality, it's a strength to be able to realize that you have reached a point where you need the meds. And at this time in my life, I didn't have enough energy or time to put the work in myself that is needed to get better from like such a mental state. So, it's okay that I need the help with the meds. And once I accepted that fact, it really helped, and realizing that if it was a broken leg, if it was diabetes, if it was any physical issue, we would take the meds. We wouldn't question it as much. So why do we need to question it so much when it's this kind of medication, Yeah, that's a bit of an overview on my journey related to medications.
Thank you so much, Antonella. Thank you very much for sharing your mental health journey with us, giving us a bit of an insight. And every time we speak, I'm truly amazed by your honesty, your openness about talking about these things, because it's not always easy to share these things to strangers, kind of, to the world. But I know it's so essential, or it's so empowering to everyone to us, but also to everyone who is watching here today, who might have the same fears, the same doubts, or the same concerns about this. And for everyone also to see that you are not alone with this, because I think oftentimes it can be quite an isolating experience, but to realize that mental health problems are way more common than you might think, and that it is also possible to recover from mental health problems and live meaningful lives. And I would also like to reiterate what you said about the mental health journey, because that's something that we also always emphasize at MHE, is that it's because oftentimes when your mental health is improving, it's quick to think, okay, now I'm fine, so I'm going to be fine for the rest of my life. I don't need to deal with this anymore. But it's exactly like you compared it to the physical health. We have regular checkups for our physical health, or a dental checkup. So of course, as everyone has physical health and everyone has mental health, we also need to take care and regularly check in how we're doing with our mental health, and it's kind of an ongoing process that's just part of life. And I think later on we can also talk a bit more about what has come up a bit throughout, which is a bit of the stigma or the self-stigma, or narratives, or people kind of, how could I put this, like judging different approaches to recovery. Well, it's just an individual experience. So again, thank you very much, Antonella. And we are slowly but surely coming to the third and final part of our discussion. And we have established that medication based on everyone's individual journey can help some people in their recovery process. But when we speak more generally about the healthcare sector or the mental healthcare industry, what we have been observing, for example, Mental Health Europe published a report, a study that researched and looked into the interactions between the different stakeholders in the health industry. And it showed what we have already been discussing during the event, that there's an over-reliance of medication, among other things, due to a lack of transparency in the relationship between the different stakeholders, right? So the stakeholders of the health industry, which can include the pharmaceutical industry. Then we have the healthcare professionals and the healthcare and patient organizations. And this lack of transparency that is also outlined in this infographic from the report that we're having is one of the reasons that has led to this culture of, as you pointed out, Jorja, of over-medicalisation and having medication or drugs as a first form of treat, as like a quick fix, instead of offering other mental health care options. So I would like to start with you, Chloe, because as I mentioned, I think in your position or with your background, you have quite an interesting perspective on this. And I would just like to ask you to outline where you, from your perspective, see the gaps in the mental health care sector.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think the question of the big pharma, as we call it, is something that we hear a lot, and not only in mental health. And I think also what we've been discussing now with mental health care and over-medicalisation is not something that is unfortunately not specific to mental health as well. Well, first, and that's something that Jorja said at some point, I think there is something that is also connected to the different types of healthcare systems we have around Europe, but also in the world. Unfortunately, some healthcare systems, mostly the liberal ones, as you have in the US, can call for over-prescribing because it's a really expensive healthcare. And unfortunately, having healthcare that is so expensive for patients makes it a little bit more of an industrial, as we might think, type of care, and not specifically something health-wise that we can see in other healthcare systems that are more towards patient-centered care, and how we can help them directly, since it's going to be something that the governments pay for. Also, I saw that also in the report you talked about sunshine law, which is something that is also really important, and that I think the European Union works a lot on as well. We talk a lot about transparency between the pharmaceutical industry, the patients, and the healthcare professionals. But for us, I think it's important to think of the pharmaceutical industry as the providers of medication, of trying to find answers to what we're needing in terms of medication. I think the issue is also collaboration within healthcare sectors, and Antonella said it well. I think there's a true lack in our training, either for medical students, but also pharmaceutical students. I think all the healthcare professionals are taught very separately. We see it now, doctors prescribe medication, but for example, antidepressants are medication that needs a lot of monitoring, and that require a lot of counseling of patients before giving the medication. The withdrawals, as we discussed, can be avoided in some cases when the patients are monitored. And then if we check how the withdrawal is acting, if it's too strong, we can switch it to a medication that has a longer half-life. And those are things that for a doctor can be, they prescribe and they do the diagnosis, and this is their specialty. And for pharmacists, their specialty is also medication. And I think if pharmacists and doctors and they all come together and they share practice, I think it will give the patients more knowledge first, and a better care in general for them. So this is something that I think is really important. Also, as we explained, and as Antonella explained a lot, it's not all about medication in mental health. It's a lot about accompanying the patient with some psychotherapy, and both come together, because it's as chemical as it is psychological, and it's important to add both. And that is also something that is really lacking in our studies. I think even as pharmaceutical students, I think when we learn about mental health and when we learn about, as you explained, drugs, I think we never hear about what care should be added to that, to giving that type of drugs, because they consider it's for the doctor to know and it's for the doctor to prescribe. But I think the pharmaceutical industry, as well as pharmacists, community pharmacists, all type of pharmacists, would understand better what the needs are and how to also create the drug and how to give it, and how to also discuss with doctors on how to prescribe it, if they understood the whole care around mental health. So I think it's generally a lack of collaboration, a lack of training, and I think everything is connected to all the stigma that we have around mental health in our society.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive overview or perspective. I don't really have much to add because I think you outlined it quite perfectly. And I think it's truly what you say, that it's such a very structural problem that involves a lot of different stakeholders, and that requires collaboration and sitting down together with all stakeholders, but also especially the patients or the persons with lived experience, following the theme of co-production. So any policies that affect them, you need to have the persons that will be affected by the policies or by the laws at the table as well. And it's like what you said also, there's obviously an interest also, especially on the young pharmaceutical students, to change something in the mental health space or in the health space. And I think with the pandemic as well, there's more urgency than ever to take increased action on that. So thank you very much, Chloe, for that outline. And next, I was wondering, Antonella, if you could speak a bit about, because I think you mentioned you were in Strasbourg right around World Mental Health Day in October as a representative at the European Youth Event, and you were in meetings, among other things, with the members of the European Parliament, kind of representing, what are the interests, what are the needs of young people. So I was wondering if you could perhaps share a bit about that, from your conversations with the politicians, what would some of the asks of young people when it comes to the future of mental health in Europe, and what changes do young people expect from European policymakers in terms of mental health?
Okay, so basically one of the main things mentioned was actually related to things like this short film. I led a workshop there, so I kind of got to know a lot of different opinions from different people. And one of the common themes was that, we need to give more support to artists when it comes to advocacy for mental health. Obviously we want better mental health care in schools, but things like this short film, for example, I take part in photo shoots related to mental health. There's songs, there's drawing, like these things are going to spark a conversation related to mental health, and through art we are able to express stuff that we can't really talk about sometimes. So it's really important that the European Union, governments in general, should start financially supporting different NGOs, different artists, so that they can have the resources that they need in order to raise awareness on mental health. And this can also help, encourage professionals to use social media to discuss such topics, because obviously that is where the youth is. A lot of young people are on social media nowadays, and anyone can post anything. So there's a lot of romanticizing medication there. Sometimes, I'm walking around and you can hear people, and it's kind of like a show and tell of who has the best meds or who has the most meds, and that's not exactly how it should be. And then you also social media can contribute to the really extreme stigmas and rumors. So it's good that we have professionals on social media spreading like actual, good facts rather than just any random rumors. Additionally, we really talked about focusing on preventive mental health care as well. There is a stigma in Malta, for example, it's there a lot, and even in other countries, as I learned when I was in Strasbourg, that you need to be on the edge to get help sometimes. Like, unless you're going to kill yourself, then there's no need for meds. If you're high functioning, people won't realize that you need meds. And then if you show any signs of mental illness, then you're suddenly crazy and you need all the meds. But, we need to focus on preventing people from getting to that bad extent, and we need to focus on why meds are important, but also that they're not the only thing that we need to do. So that is very important. And also improving training of professionals, as Chloe said as well, like pharmacists, doctors, even police and teachers, like they all need better professional training on how to deal with kids, with students who do have mental health problems and who are taking meds, and raising proper awareness on that is all very important. And working together to reduce the discrepancies. I feel like at the moment there is more awareness being raised on mental health, that it's really important, but at the same time people still don't know how to react when someone is mentally ill. In Malta last week, a guy was trying to commit suicide by jumping off this really high building, and people were recording it and saying like, come on, jump off so that we can go back to work. So that is, I think, as far back as you can go in terms of mental health. And we had been priding ourselves on the fact that mental health is gaining more traction in Malta, but clearly people still don't know how to deal with it. They just made fun of it. So, we need to just keep on creating films like this, creating art, talking, and just really educating each other and ourselves on mental health.
Thank you very much, Antonella, for sharing your perspective from Malta, I guess, but also globally. Before moving on to the Q&A session, I would just like to mention again, for those of you who would like to inform themselves more about this topic, I think my colleague already shared in the chat a link to the report that we outlined on the slide as the infographic, where you can find out more about the research that we did, as I mentioned, as Mental Health Europe, about the interplay and the lack of transparency, but also outlining the way forward, and with a set of recommendations of what we hope to see in the policy landscape and in the healthcare industry in Europe going forward. So next, we will take some questions from our audience. I would just briefly see.
If I can.
Yes, Chloe, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just one small thing about what Antonella said about what's missing in the training. I think that's also something that healthcare students have been advocating for, all healthcare students. It's mainly soft skills in our curricula. In order to better communicate with patients, but also to know how to act in front of patients and how to, just manage that type of situation. I think bringing up soft skills, I think, is really important when talking about mental health management.
Okay.
And can I just add one thing really quick to that, that I think is really interesting, is that when I'm applying for jobs in the creative world, it's all about your hard skills and what hard skills you can put on your resume. I think that's really interesting, because now we're having this discussion where we get to come together and say, oh, wait, like what, you feel missing in your curriculum or your training to make a difference is kind of opposing to what we're missing. So if we all collaborated, that's really cool.
For sure. Thank you very much, Kelly. So one question that we received from one participant is saying that he or she fully agrees with the over-reliance on psychiatric medication, which can help some, but might not be the safest or long-term solution, or definitely, yeah, not sustainable for everyone. And the participant is asking, and I think we kind of outlined this already, but perhaps we can all just kind of sum up what can be other mental health care options, or what can be other ways to look after your mental health. First thing that come to my mind from our work at Mental Health Europe and what we try to support and transform kind of the mental health care sector is that we try to promote especially human rights-based mental health care services, such as community-based services, where also people who might have quite severe psychosocial disabilities that might affect them in their daily lives can still live with as much independence and ownership over their lives and be active participants of society. And then also peer support, which are formats where you can be on your recovery journey with other people who might experience mental health problems, but also because we consider people with lived experience of mental health problems to be experts of their own lives. You will know you will figure out what will work best for you, and who better to ask than someone who has kind of gone through it, who has experienced this on their journey, to help someone who might be in the middle of it right now. But I'm going to stop there and perhaps let someone else from the panel, if you would like to, and it can be anything from what I just outlined, the more traditional or official, let's say, mental health care options, but it can also be daily tips or whatever helps you on a daily basis, and like practical things that have helped you and might help our viewers.
I wouldn't mind sharing, I guess, some things from my perspective. Like, I'm not a medical professional, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, so I can only speak from my experience. And I think something that I have learned in therapy is to not punish ourselves when we have bad mental health days. If I have a day when my anxiety is terrible and I can't even focus on working or going out or whatever I'm supposed to do, it's okay to just be kind to yourself and, take a nap, like drink some water, like eat some food, just make sure you have your basic essentials taken care of. Therapy, of course, is great if you can get it. Again, it doesn't fix like everything. And I've been in therapy in and out of it for like maybe 6 or 7 years. And, there's always new problems arising. So there's always different things to talk about. And then as an artist, I would just say like having a creative outlet, because talking about these things, after I made this film, I started making comedic videos about mental health on social media. And that's now grown into a community of over like 100,000 people, because I think that people see this and they can help show these things to their friends and as like a way of explaining. But for me, it's been a good creative outlet, because when you get this stuff off your chest, you feel instantly less burdened and it feels less heavy and you feel less alone, and then other people feel less alone. So I think even just talking about it, whether it be to a friend or then, publicly or on the internet or bigger scales, like with this organization, like that's how we will all destigmatize it and all hopefully gradually feel better from the beginning.
Yes, thank you, Georgia. I couldn't have put it better. And I think it creates this kind of positive cycle, if you can put it like that. Once one person starts to share, the other person is like, oh, I'm not the only one, you too. And, it gets easier and easier to have these conversations. I think, Kelly, you would like to also say something on this.
Yeah, I think to go off of what Georgia said, I feel that I'm sorry, I totally lost train of thought. Can we go back one notch? What was the last thing you said, Georgia?
Feeling less alone, having a creative outlet.
Okay, yeah. So I think that the loneliness side of mental health, I think, is really important to address. And I think there's an irony in the fact that it's hard to share who you are and to share your vulnerabilities, specifically if you are dealing with mental health issues. because of the traumatic stuff that can kind of happen online on top of already what you're doing. However, I wonder, Jorja, like, how do you like navigate that side of that? Of like the negative backlash, because I find that like sometimes when I talk about mental health, specifically, you know, with older generations in our, you know, baby boomers and such, it's sort of like there's no such thing as a trigger or just, you know, pass it. And like, do you get a lot of that feedback in this like younger audience on your social media?
I think it's definitely changing with the younger audience, which is great because we need to protect these kids and, you know, get to the root of things before they are tortured adults like us. But there's sometimes negative backlash. It's a lot less mean comments than good ones. It's mostly positive support in my experience. The comments that are mean are stupid. It's people who are on their own journeys and like maybe someday they'll feel differently, but they don't usually have much to add of substance that's like helpful to anyone, because there's bullies on the internet in general. But I think focusing on like the social side of social media, it can be a toxic thing that's bad for your mental health, or it can be this amazing community,
right?
Just who you follow, where you spend your time on the internet, and trying to navigate your own mental health there as well.
Yeah, I like that sort of. I was just interested because like the collaboration of that I think is so cool, but the opposing side, those that aren't collaborating, I guess, don't get to be a part of it.
Yeah, they don't.
Great, thank you too very much. And there's one more question that I would like to open to all of you. Which is the current times, the pandemic has led, we've seen globally, to an increase of mental health problems in Europe, but also globally. And more than ever, people are affected by mental health problems. But on the other hand, I guess in a kind of positive way, if you can put it like that, it has also pushed the topic more into the public realm. We see more people talking about it, politicians recognizing its importance on a European level. So again, I don't think your film could have come at a timelier moment, Jorja. And I was wondering if you have any ideas, or because what I sometimes wonder is, how can we make sure to keep this momentum? I don't believe, maybe I'm too optimistic, but that it's going to completely go away now that it started, thanks to the pandemic. But still, I was wondering, maybe from your perspectives, maybe from Antonella, your more advocate, activist perspective, Jorja, Kelly, from your artistic perspective, what can each of us do to keep having these conversations and achieve change?
I think exactly what you said, just keep having these conversations, because we don't know if there's just more mental health issues or they're highlighted more now that people are talking about them more, or both of the above. But I'm still navigating the pandemic and being inside most of the time, so I don't really know what it's going to look like. And healing is a never-ending journey, I guess, is what I'm learning. But I think just, remembering like whatever works for us, making our own decisions, and hoping that impacts the world on a larger scale.
Yes, thank you. Beautiful. Antonella, please feel free to continue.
I agree with what Jorja said, and I think that in general we should just keep working on it in our individual lives as well, because you can touch people's lives by just saying one word, by just one smile, and you wouldn't even know it. But just doing our best to take care of ourselves, and in turn, taking care of the ones around us, and then just spreading positivity will really help. And not just the positivity, embracing our bad days as well, knowing that, as Jorja said as well, it's okay to be kind to ourselves. It's okay to realize that bad days, bad moments, bad weeks or months or years are also a part of life, and that's okay. And just continuing to share art related to mental health. I really believe that any form of art is so important in raising awareness in anything. And, you know, I think sharing that continuously can really help, and sharing, you know, even Instagram pages like Mental Health Europe as well, which has actual factual information and good tips for people, can really help to kind of, you know, spread the good pages on social media more, and kind of combat the exaggerated rumors or stigmas. And I would also like to thank you, the people who wrote in the comments as well, Marcin and Ewa. I don't know if I pronounced your names. I'm reading your comments now, and I really agree with what both of you said so much, and especially in relation to medication. It's true, there's like stigma with not taking medication and taking medication, so it's like you can't win either way. And I think that's it happens a lot like that in life, that no matter what decision you make, people are still going to judge you, which is why it's really important to just focus on the decision that is right for you. Like, you know, for example, for me, taking meds right now was right for me, but taking meds 6 months ago was not the best decision. So, you know, just figuring out yourself and what's the right decision for you at that point in time is what's important. And also, even if you don't make the right decision, it's okay. We learn from our mistakes, and, you know, life is just trial and error over and over again. So, you know, just put less pressure on yourself and help spread awareness, and that's it.
Thank you, leaving us all very inspired, Antonella. Unless anyone else wants to say something, I think we can close the Q&A session here. Thanks to all the participants who wrote in the Q&A, but also in the comment section. And if there were any questions that we maybe missed or didn't have time to discuss now, please let us know, and we'll make sure to follow up afterwards. So ladies, I could talk about mental health with you for hours, but I think it's time to wrap it up. And I want to thank you all very, very much for sharing your insights, for sharing your expertise, for sharing your experiences with us. And I'm sure it resonated with everyone watching tonight. I for one, am feeling very inspired right now. And to wrap up, I would like to ask everyone, all the speakers, to perhaps just, you know, as a closing statement, kind of to tell us in one sentence or in a few sentences why mental health matters to you.
I can start quick. I just think mental health matters to me, not only because it's affected me, but everyone around me and beyond. And yeah, I think we should put as much emphasis as we're putting on physical health for mental health, and you know, just let everybody know that your brain's a powerful beast, and we can all do this together.
Yeah, I agree. I think mental health matters because without at least basic, you know, default level good mental health, we don't have anything else. You know, we can burn ourselves out and we can keep grinding and working, or, you know, crash and burn. It doesn't help like our careers. It doesn't help the people around us. It just is not sustainable. So yeah, without mental health, we don't have anything else. And I think that's why I find it important. And thank you for having us.
Well, I think I'll go next. Not to repeat what Kelly and Jorja just already said, but as a future healthcare professional, I think mental health is really important because it's part of every disease we might have. We talk a lot about cancer, but for example, in cancer, mental health is also very put in danger, but all types of disease. So I think taking care of our physical health also needs our mental health to be good. So this is why it matters.
I agree with what everyone has said so far, and I would like to add that, you know, our brain is the most complex organ, and yet it's the one that's been disregarded the most over the years, which is kind of absurd. And I think now is the time to kind of really highlight why it's important and why we need to take care of our mind in order to just live a really satisfying life. So I think that's why it's important.
Beautifully said, girls. Thank you so much. I don't really have much to add. I think you put it all. You put the nail on the head. And I think mental health is just really part of what makes us human, you know, or what this is a part of our humanity. And once we realize that, I think there's so much power in that, and that's something that can actually reunite us. So with that, I would like to close today's event, and I want to thank once again our brilliant panelists. Thank you so much. I would also like to give thanks to my colleagues, Jackie and Fatima, who have been navigating everything in the back end to ensure a smooth event. And lastly, of course, I want to thank our audience and anyone who tuned in tonight or today or wherever you are joining from. I hope you learned something today or had some insights perhaps for your own mental health journey, feeling inspired or a bit more hopeful these days. So thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you all.
Yeah, nice.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.